I look over to my left, and there on the coffee table, and somehow I moved it to the coffee table, was the green text, and on it said an English interpretation of the Holy Quran, something like that. The Holy Quran in English interpretation. So I thought I would pick it up, just have a quick glance. Up to that point, I never really got a lot out of reading scriptures. I did read some translations, various scriptures, but I found you get more out of talking to people, or reading about the religion, what other people write about it, rather than actually reading the scripture. So I wasn't expecting much. So I picked it up, and I began reading it. Thought I'd read a few pages. And it surprised me. Even the first surah surprised me. It's the one the young man, did he recite it today? No, he recited it the other day. Or he recited it the earlier program today. The first surah of the Quran, just 7 lines. All praise be to God, the ruler of all worlds, the merciful, compassionate, master of the it's like a hymn of praise. It reminded me of the Psalms of David. That's what I related. And then I got to the end of it, and then I suddenly realized it switched from being a hymn of praise to a prayer for guidance. And I thought, oh, how clever this author is. Tricked me into making a prayer for guidance. Prayer to God I didn't even believe in. And I thought, well, at least he's clever. So I turned to the next surah, and it begins, Aleph, Lam, Mim, 3 Arabic letters. That is the book, wherein no doubt is the guidance for those who are on their guard, alert, on their guard, on their toes. So I read that, and I said, are you talking to me? Because I just made a prayer for guidance, inadvertently. And now it's saying, that is the book wherein no doubt is the guidance. Then I look at the opening line, and it says, that is the book. So I thought, this author really is very good. Because first of all, he's doing something ingenious. He's writing a revelation. And instead of making a revelation the history of a people or a biography of somebody or a bunch of great anecdotes or beautiful stories, it's God's personal address to the reader. You're reading it, it's God addressing you. I thought, he's bold, but he's also, ingenious. It's like the 10 Commandments expanded to a text. So I was very intrigued. So I kept on reading. And the next several lines, the next 20 or so lines, sort of summarize what the Quran is all about. And then it talks about the prerequisites for gaining knowledge and guidance from the Scripture. It talks about those who will not gain guidance. It talks about those who will reject it out of hand and can't be guided by it. It dismisses them in one line. And then it talks about people who are on the fence. It goes into some detail about them and their inability to make their minds up, and some of the psychology behind their kind of waveringness and uncertainty. And then finally, after it gets through that, it talks about the use of allegory and prophetic guidance and things like that in very concise, short form. Fits all that in. With beautiful poetic style, lyrical style, even though it doesn't resemble Arabic poetry. So in any case, then after I get through that, I come to verse 30 of the Quran, and I'm impressed, but I'm getting close to ready to just read a few more pages. Then I come upon this verse, and it says, Behold, your Lord said to the angels, I am going to place a vicegerent on earth, a representative of mine, a successor, a emissary, might be a good word. The Arabic word is khalifa for the Arabs in the audience. I'm sure you know it. It's a hard word to translate, but that's pretty close. Behold, your Lord said to the angels. This is a heavenly announcement. And in the announcement, God says in heaven before all the angels and hosts, makes this phenomenal election. I'm going to make this, I'm about to create a representative of mine on earth, one who acts on my behalf. And the angel said in the next verse, will you place therein one who will spread corruption and shed much blood? Will you place therein one who will spread corruption and shed blood? While we, the angels, celebrate your praises and glorify you? And I read that verse, and I just froze. Because it all came back to me. You know, I was a graduate, I was a professor now. I had sort of kind of cut away from my past, veiled myself from it, felt I was getting away from it, and that verse just brought it all back. It brought back my dad, my mom, the chaos, the violence, my neighborhood, the gang fights, Vietnam. All of it just came rushing back through my mind, because that was my question. God starts it by saying, yeah, I'm going to create this great representative of mine on earth. And the angels say, you're going to put there in one who's going to spread corruption and shed much blood? When you could just make us, while we, the angels, celebrate your praises and glorify you? Why are you creating this most criminally inclined and violent and destructive being? When you could just make us, who celebrate your praises and glorify your holy name? It felt like the author had taken my whole life and reduced it to those 2 lines. I felt this weight come over me, as if he had pulled me into some dark and silent corner to speak only and directly to me. I felt like this was written for me. And then the answer, God said, back to the angels in response, truly I know what you do not know. In modern parlance, you might say, truly I know exactly what I'm doing. I thought, you know what you do not know? You know exactly what you're doing? Are you joking? Don't you know what pain we're going through down here? Don't you know what kind of violence this world is dominated by? How the evil always seems to inevitably win out? With wars, and the famine, and AIDS, and corruption, and George Bush. You get the point, though. I'll never, every speech, I gotta go after George Bush. But seriously, don't you realize the magnitude of human suffering? And I say all that just to give you a sort of a feeling for what happened as I was reading through the Quran. Constantly finding, getting in this veritable dialogue with the scripture, with the author. A very, very emotional dialogue. And at this moment, here I am, arguing against a God I don't even believe in. Saying, don't you realize what you're doing to us? My 4 brothers went down that same dark path of alcoholism and drug addiction as my father. That was their escape. My escape was I used my mathematical ability to get out of Bridgeport, Connecticut when I was 18, and I very seldom came back after that. I never looked back. My 4 brothers weren't so lucky. One was a heroin addict, another one was an addict when he was 13, the brother I was closest to. Another one was a cocaine addict and a heroin addict. Another one was an alcoholic, and he died from it at an early age. My mom had to live through all that and suffer the guilt for knowing that she never divorced my father. And that became a major problem for her as she got older. But in any case, so you could see, I was really amazed. And to make it worse, the question's being asked in heaven. Why would you create this criminal creature, put him in an environment where he could work out his worst criminal inclinations, having this false feeling of independence from God, when you could just make them angels and pop them into heaven? A lot of content in that verse.